All right. Hello and welcome to the Viking Codecast. This is a weekly conversation with developers and people from around the tech industry, relevant to anyone who's interested in learning how to code, how to become a software engineer, or is looking to level up their skills. This is run by my name is Erik Trautman. I'm the founder of the Viking Code School, and Viking Code School is basically a way of getting yourself from zero to a position in that industry. So with us today we have Nick Sarlo, who is a former student of Viking and who's now working down in Austin for uShip as an engineer down there. And he's going to talk to all of us and to all of you about what it's like to kind of make that entry, that transition from the end of a boot camp into the real working world and working on a software team. And of course, as usual, anything that you guys have as far as questions along the way. So I think just before Nick, we dive into what you're up to, I just want to make a note that if you have questions and you're viewing, you're welcome to use the Q&A app. It's somewhere on your sidebar. There's a little Q&A, and that'll allow you to ask questions. And of course, if you're here with us in the Hangout as a current student, feel free to just chime in anytime, because this is absolutely going to be driven by you guys. So, Nick, it's my pleasure to have you with us. And so, I guess the first question is always the same. It's kind of who are you, why are you here, and let's take it from there.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So, like Erik said, my name's Nick. I've been programming for about 3-ish years off and on, but the part that everyone probably cares about is I am a Viking graduate. I was graduated from the first full-time cohort in October of 2015. And was fortunate enough to immediately be hired with uShip down in Austin. We are a sort of an online marketplace for shipping things. So if you need like a car or a cat, anything shipped, you put your item online, and then carriers come and they say, I will take your cat or car to where it needs to go. It's pretty cool working there because it's very interesting working on a product as opposed to making like a website in support of a product. I am involved with making the product. I love what I do. I worked hard to get here, and I'm really happy with where I am. And yeah, so hopefully I can share some experiences with everybody here about my transition. Not too much technical talk here, but more just hoping that you can learn from my experiences. Any questions that you have, feel free to ask them. I'm sure we'll have time at the end. So yeah, without further ado, I have a little, it's more for personal notes, but I have some slides just to keep track of everything, something to look at besides my face. So, yeah, we're going to be talking about getting acclimated as a software development teammate. These are the confessions of a bootcamp graduate, which is particularly relevant because many of you will also be graduates of bootcamps or self-taught, just non-traditional but quickly growing ways of becoming professional software engineers. I think we went over a lot of this already. My job at uShip is my first full-time software development job, so it was a big hurdle, a lot of challenges, pretty nerve-wracking walking into that environment. But I learned a lot from it, and it's really exciting. And like I said, I've realized that a lot of the things I was worried about, I probably shouldn't have been. But we'll get into that. So just a quick overview. Like I said, my intention is to sort of share my experience and help everyone prepare for their transitions into the professional workplaces. Everyone's experiences are going to vary drastically, which is why I could tell you how to get, how to learn a code base, how to learn a workflow, how to participate in your Agile team, but it's going to your experience is going to vary pretty drastically based on the size of your team, the maturity of your code base. If you're on a big team, the dynamic of your Agile team, if you're even in an Agile environment, which you probably will be, but it's going to vary drastically than if you were in a small team. And so, for example, uShip has about 40 developers, plus designers, plus QAs, plus Scrum Masters, plus product team, plus executives. I mean, there's a lot of moving pieces. And so, where you fit into that is going to vary a little bit, but there are some generalizations I can make that I'll share. Also, young versus young, and to general bases versus mature, sometimes big, complex code bases with legacy code and several languages. different workflows using different choices for distributed source control, testing, integration. I mean, there's so many different things. But we're going to focus on just learning the code base, my experience learning a new code base. Unfortunately, mine was the latter, the mature, big, and complex code base, um, but it wasn't nearly as bad as I thought when I walked in on day one. Adjusting to the new workflow, going from Viking's actually very adequate teaching of a professional workflow to an actual professional workflow, which is different in some ways, and it can be intimidating. And then sort of learning your place on your team, on your Agile team, and your place in the company, and how I sort of came to terms with what I thought my role was going into it, and what my role ended up being. And I'm still learning that to this day. I'm sure I'm going to keep learning and growing in that sense for a while. And then questions. If we have time for, I'm sure we will. Time for questions at the end. Feel free to ask me about what we've hiring, anything. I mean, I am a graduate of Viking, so pick my brain, whatever you need, I am here. So learning the code base. My first few weeks were extremely overwhelming. I was hired as a full stack developer, but I was hired having learned Ruby on Rails and JavaScript, and I was hired in a stack that used ASP.NET and MVC and JavaScript, but a bunch of different libraries. So, I knew that I was going to be strong in JavaScript on day one. But even on day one, I was looking at JSX, and I had no idea what JSX is. You may not know what JSX is right now when I'm telling you about it. And so, I thought I was going to, okay, JavaScript. And then all of a sudden, it's not really the JavaScript that I was familiar with. So you're going to get a lot of curveballs. You're going to have libraries. You're going to have new languages. You're going to have libraries in these new languages. Don't expect to walk in on day one and really know what's going on, or be able to be productive in any meaningful way. It felt like it was really taking a while for me to get integrated to the code base, but and I'll share my experience how I learned that in a second. Was that the code base is new to everyone, from junior developers to senior developers alike. Everyone has growing pains, and they're all pretty significant. And it's especially true for more mature code bases. For example, after I had been with the company for a little bit, and I was pretty well versed and pretty grounded in the code base, and I had been productive for a while, I was asked to onboard a new senior developer. This is someone who was going to do almost exclusively back-end code, which I'm still new to C# and .NET and everything. So I was supposed to onboard this person, and we were given a ticket to create a new API endpoint. And I assumed that I would be able to sit down with this person, sort of be able to help her navigate the code, where things are, and then she would be able to do a lot of the heavy lifting, because she is this senior developer who has worked in C# and .NET and worked on defense systems her entire, like a bunch of different crazy stuff for background. But I thought that she would be able to sort of step in and do all these things. And it's the exact opposite. I mean, she was not familiar with almost anything. I mean, she knew the basics. She understood the language, but our file, our directory structure, just our design patterns and everything were so new to her. And also this other senior developer that I helped onboard, that I ended up doing most of the work. And it actually ended up being really good, because it helped me get better at my back-end code, and two, it also helped me realize that no matter what level you are, when you start at a new company, at a new code base, you're going to feel new. And so when you walk into your first job on day one as a bootcamp graduate, don't feel that inadequate. Don't get that down at the fact that everything is new to you, because it's new to everybody. I think when you're a senior developer and you're bounced around between a couple jobs for a while, the only thing you know is that you know nothing. Code bases vary pretty drastically. For example, we just had at uShip a director of development start, and he is spending the first 6 months of his tenure working directly on a team. I mean, our directors don't code, but he's going to be coding, he's going to be shadowing and working just so he knows what's going on, because you can't assume anybody actually knows from day one what's going on. So you're in good company in that nobody knows what they're doing on day one. So the big thing to remember is great workshops, places you want to work, and hopefully places that you will be working, they tend to hire great developers. That's a developer, period. You're a programmer. You want to be you want to strive to be a programmer. You don't want to be a JavaScript programmer. You don't want to be a Rails developer. You want to be so sound in your fundamentals and your knowledge of how computers and code works that you can apply that to anything. And generally, they'll try to hire people like that. And if you're in the door, then they know that. So their expectations are probably realistic, as long as you were honest with them. So don't stress about languages. Don't stress about not being able to be productive right away. I'm finding it's a pretty common thing for developers the onboarding process to be pretty long, pretty lengthy, just because of that fact. And use the people around you. Ask questions. Use code reviews. Look at what other people are doing. Be careful about copy pasting. There's been a couple times where I've copy pasted code that, because I thought it was easy, and I've gotten caught doing that because it just doesn't work like that. But you know that because you're a great programmer. But sometimes you have moments of weakness. So the biggest tip I can tell you is learn how to debug. You want to be able to solve problems in this new code, and so the quicker that you're able to figure out the debugging tools and be able to step into code, then you can see how things are happening. So I know when I was using Visual Studio and working in C#, which I had never done before, I learn that stuff of just learning how to debug in this code, learning how to identify on my monitor what elements are what in this code was a huge step for me understanding, because after that point, then it's just code, and we know code. If you're a Viking student, then you have been doing code for a really long time preparing for this moment, so it should not be new to you, despite regardless of what the language is. So adjusting to the workflow. So I mentioned earlier that I felt like that Viking prepared me pretty solidly for as much as you can for getting into a professional workflow, but it's almost guaranteed going to be different from what you know. Don't stress about it. It's very similar to new code, where the new workflow is going to be different everywhere you go. Therefore, everyone who's new is going to need to learn the new workflow. However, also don't assume that you know how to do different things. If you walk into a place that uses Git, you don't just assume you know how they implement Git, especially because Git, I'm finding, is very flexible, and Git gives you a lot of different ways to sort of do source control. So just use documentation, ask people, find out. They should give you resources. If not, just don't assume anything. It was very overwhelming when I started. I didn't know any of the tools. I mean, I went from using Git to using Mercurial and like continuous integration and automated testing and TeamCity and all kinds of different software tools and things that I had never seen before. So learning all of that on top of everything else was pretty stressful. But you're well prepared for it's the same thing as programming. The basics of source control. You know why you're doing it. You know why you do different things. And so you have a pretty solid foundation using Git already and working in teams. Especially working in teams, you don't really appreciate how many people, junior level developers, don't get the opportunity to work in teams on projects before they actually step into their first job. So yeah. But like I said, expect to run into a lot of additional tools. Even Git has different ways of doing it. You'll run into things like local sites, development sites, personal development sites. I mean, there's a lot of different things. The next big thing to work in to be prepared for are more rigorous code reviews. Now we do code reviews. We did code reviews a lot in Viking. I'm sure everyone has done code reviews. They're not going to be the same as what you do. I mean, they may be the same as when one of your instructors pulls up your code and asks you to like break it down and looks at it. That's going to be every code review, more likely than not. Just be ready for it. Use it as an opportunity to learn design patterns and the ways things are done in your shop. Code review is a very collaborative process. So if you have a reason why you did something a certain way, be able to explain it clearly. Just because someone disagrees doesn't mean that they're correct. My first couple of code reviews were very much just saying, okay, yep, sure, he said it, so he's got to know. But it's very much not that not that. And if you can explain why you did something a certain way, a lot of times they'll agree. They just want to know why you did something, because code is a very creative thing, and so it's not very clear to people reading it. But you know that because, like I said, you should be well prepared to read code. But you're going to get better. You're going to do a lot of it, and you're going to have a lot of people reviewing your code. So yeah, and then the last, I guess the last big surprise for me was just the QA process. So QAing as a completely separate part of the process or a completely separate team involved in the process was very new to me. I remember QAing for me in my personal projects and even in Viking was sort of, okay, does this work? All right, seems to work there. And that, because you're so busy, you have so much going on, you're trying to cram so much into such a small period of time. So now QAing becomes this very big, very thorough process. Even the most basic of QAing, quality assurance, I guess I should probably just specify, but just making sure that everything's functioning as it should and just trying to break it. I mean, it's kind of like and I'm sure at least the people in the cohort now, but anytime you've tried to break your website or when you have other people trying to break your website, that's what they're trying to do. Some of them are almost evil in how much enjoyment they get out of it. But that's what they're going to do. They're going to take your code. They're going to try to break it in any way possible. So just be conscious that that's part of the process, but also realize that QAs are part of your team. You want to work with them to get your tickets complete and integrated. It's everyone's job at the end of the day to get the ticket from your backlog to integrated or done, whatever the end of the process is. One big suggestion, two big suggestions is one, don't take it personal. They're not trying to make you look bad. They're not trying to make your job harder. They're just doing their jobs. Because if you have thousands and thousands of people using your site, if a QA person finds it, it's probably going to be a couple dozen or a couple hundred people that run into the same problem. The biggest thing I can suggest is try to self QA as much as possible. Test things on different. Find out all of the browsers that you're supposed to support. Sometimes that'll take a little digging. A lot of times, even some of the most even the best onboarding processes won't just tell you basic things like what browsers do you support, what versions. So try to find out from day one. Don't just ship code in Chrome, or don't just expect to finish code in Chrome and then it to work perfectly on all view sizes on Safari, and then be surprised when it just doesn't. So self QA as much as possible. Try to really find those bugs yourself before it gets to QA. It requires a little bit more work on your end, but I found personally that it ends up decreasing the time from backlog to integration significantly. It's kind of the more times you check it, the less times you have to redo it. It definitely helps be more efficient. Be ready to break things. Sometimes things get through QA. Sometimes you break the build. A lot of times that'll get caught in your continuous integration systems and testing and everything like that. But sometimes even you just push production, bad code to production. So you're going to break stuff. The most important thing I can say from day one is to know how to fix it, know how to back changes out, know how to do things that can undo the damage that you do. And then just accept it. It happens. We have a broken build bear that we pass around our office for people that do it as a shaming mechanism. But it's mostly in good fun. But it is important to sort of know how to undo. So one big thing that you can learn from day one is when it gets through QA is just know how to back out changes and know how to undo things that you break. All right.
I like the broken build bear.
Yeah. I had the build bear already, and it does its job well. It's definitely an effective shaming mechanism when it sits on your desk while everyone's walking by. So the last part I want to talk about a little is sort of learning your role in your team. Now, this is specifically, at least from my experience, on an Agile team, but it could be just your team, just your role in the company in general. I'm still learning things about what my role is today. but it's really important to get a feel for what that is. It took me a while to realize, for example, that design and product weren't all powerful. My first couple tickets, design or product would tell me to do things one way, and I would say, yes, ma'am, may I have another, or how high in pixels, of course. And I thought and assumed that my role was to make whatever they threw at me happen. But regardless of your level of experience before, you're part of a team, and companies want people who are going to contribute as a part of a team. They don't want code monkeys. They don't want people who are just going to mindlessly churn out whatever even the executives or whatever anyone gives you. You don't just make it happen and then that's it. You want to think about. You want to be familiar with the business decisions behind it. You want to be familiar with metrics and why they're doing things. Because it's your job to sort of take that into consideration and then consider the technical implementation and decide sometimes whether or not it's even worth it. Some places will actually give you that much power to an extent, but yeah, like I said, shops, they don't just want code monkeys. They want intelligent people who can comment on business decisions in intelligent ways from a technical perspective. They want to know if we want it to look like this, and your job is to tell them at what cost, and to know at what cost, and have that in your mind. Don't just assume that they've considered everything that goes into your ticket, because I guarantee that they haven't. Your designer, your product's being told from executives they want this, and your designer is being told that, oh, this looks good, or it is telling people that this looks good. So it is your job to push back. Don't be afraid to. I was afraid to. Like I said, first couple of tickets was just churning them out, and now different levels of pushing back. If you know something is a really bad idea, push back more. You can't and definitely won't win all of your battles, but it is important. That is part of your job as a developer. It's not just to write code, but it's to make sure that anything technical, it's to take all things technical into consideration. You want to, because you're all responsible for the final product, design, product, QA. Developers are all responsible for what actually gets to the consumer on the other end. I knew it wasn't going to work, but that's not an acceptable response. Take ownership, take pride in what you're creating and what you're doing. A lot of this comes down to asking questions in sprint planning. Don't just sort of let people talk about the implementation of what you're going to do. Ask questions, understand the ticket, understand everything that goes into it. If a ticket needs to be more granular, say so. Generally, your product manager won't be offended if you say this ticket is not granular enough. If a ticket's not specific enough, say so. Just communicate. Because, like I said, everyone's working together at the end of the day to create a product, regardless of what that product actually is. Your role will vary. So this is speaking from experience, but this is speaking from experience after speaking to other people who have worked at multiple places. You definitely don't want to just accept what's given to you. Just be part of the process, be part of creating it instead of just sort of implementing it. So just like I said, ask people who have been around for a little bit. One great person to ask is your Scrum Master. When I started, the role of a Scrum Master was pretty unclear to me still, but I'm starting to learn that the Scrum Master can be your best friend. They can tell you exactly, because they're sort of responsible for the dynamic of the team, so they can tell you exactly what your role is. If you feel like product isn't listening to you, they're the ones that can sort of say, like, listen, that can sort of bring you together and make sure that everyone's opinions are being heard. So this is sort of a side note, but another big thing is because you're working as a team, all of your work has to be okayed by the team. Make sure that nothing that you're doing is out of scope of the team's goal. Like I said, this is generally speaking, but I feel like that speaks for most agile shops. So don't do the work without your team knowing or agreeing to it. You're going to get ad hoc requests from other teams. This is broken. Can you fix this? You're going to get ad hoc requests from people in data analysis and people like executives. I had a vice president say to me, to our team. He's directly emailed our team and said like, oh, this needs to be fixed. We have people in like reporting and accounting saying this needs to be fixed. Customer service, this needs to be fixed. You're going to get a lot of noise coming from the outside. And like I said, even if the CEO himself tells you to do something, just don't just do it. Consult with your Scrum Master, consult with your team, consult with product, because it's more likely than not, it's not something that is absolutely needs to be done right there. And because it's a team effort, you don't want to hurt the team's velocity and hurt the team's ultimate goal because you're not running ad hoc requests by them. Generally, follow the process. If the process should become pretty clear, follow the process. Let your product manager and Scrum Master do their jobs. Let them sort of filter out the noise that's coming in and help you sort of stay focused on the work. That was really a big moment for me when I realized that, because I would get ad hoc requests from people, from senior developers, from a lot of higher people, and I would just think I have to do it immediately, and then I would learn that is not the way that it happens. But sort of accepting that, being able to tell. I mean, I'm not joking when I say if the CEO sends you an email, if you're in an Agile team, the CEO sends you an email personally saying you should do this. I'm really not joking when I say just run it through your team. The process exists for a reason, and that's, like I said, that's something that I learned from experience. But yeah, so that's pretty much all I have. I can take questions now. I know there wasn't too much content there, but that's some of my experiences and some of the things I learned as walking in day one as about green of a developer as you can be from a professional stance, and just some of the things that I picked up along the way, and some of the things that I stressed about, and some of the things that I realized during my first couple of weeks, and that I'm still learning to this day. So that's all I really have as far as that goes. So if you have questions, I guess this is the time for them.
Absolutely. Just a reminder, if you're viewing right now, you can use the Q&A app, and otherwise, feel free to chime up. So specifically looking at you guys here.
So I definitely have a question.
Sure.
I've definitely in a good position. I've been working for 2 days now after graduating Viking, and I just want to first second that everything you've said is completely spot on. Like, it's exactly per my experiences. Like, your advice is amazingly great. I guess a big question I have is, because you're in such a very agile focused work environment, do you feel in any way limited by it, and that, like, moving forward in your career you'd want to try something else, or do you actually enjoy the structure and having Scrum Master and just having it very, very agile?
So I'm going to say first off that is a debate that is going to be had amongst developers over lunch probably for the rest of your career. The efficacy of Agile and how Agile is too agile. So it's something that people are very opinionated about. Personally, at first, it seemed like a lot of fluff around the process, just a process for the sake of the process. But I've learned that it really helps to sort of get big tasks done, and to sort of make sure that your team stays on focus. And I say that from my experience, where we had our team getting a lot of ad hoc requests. When I first joined, we had a very big project that we had finished, and so people thought that we weren't doing things, and so we were getting people emailing us, and our Scrum Master sort of stepped up to, because I'm going to be honest, when I first started, I didn't know what the heck the Scrum Master did. But then when he started stepping in and insulating us from these ad hoc requests and keeping us focused, I realized just how quickly it can get out of control, especially when you have pretty solid sprint planning, and you have almost, like, we work in 3-week sprints. When you have all 3 of those weeks pretty planned out, as close as you really can be, it's important that everyone stays focused, and you can really get some cool product out pretty quickly, and you can really sort of pivot really quickly with it. So it does seem like a lot. It seemed when I first started that it was just a lot for nothing, but I think as of now I think I like the process. I like the what comes of it, and it seems to produce a pretty productive environment. For example, we're able to get a lot of business value quicker, as opposed to, I guess, the alternative, which is more waterfall, which is where you have to wait until something is done to get any business value out of it. So yeah, I mean, like, my personal opinion is I'm okay with it, but if you ask other people, they're going to give you very different opinions about it. We have these discussions all the time. Some disgruntled developers who hate it and want to just have like a coding anarchy where they can just code whatever they want and they can make all the business decisions, to people who actually like the waterfall process. So yeah, but that's my opinion on it. I mean, it works. I like it so far. But you definitely have to realize what you are in it, because you have a lot. You also get a lot of say and a lot of input onto what you're doing, because you're working on a team of like 5, 6, 7, 10 developers. People like project managers, QAs, and everything. So you really, it's really great because you can take a big company like we have 40 developers, for example, and it feels small because we have a team of, I think, 9 people total, with developers, QA, design, product, and everything. So you really feel like you're making an impact in that sense because you're not just lost in the sea of developers. I don't know if that answers your question. I kind of rambled a little bit, but
No, great answer. Actually, it's coming from the structure of Viking. It's just it's something that I learned to enjoy, and it's actually good to hear that even after working for a while, you still enjoy the structure, and it's not something that's holding you back.
yeah, I mean, Viking was great in that sense because, I mean, I was used to it. I hadn't worked professionally in an Agile environment, but I had worked in an Agile environment for 4 months, and employers, prospective employers, were very impressed by that too. So that's something for anyone who isn't hired yet to really focus on, because it's something that people sometimes struggle to adjust to.
That's a good point. Anyone else?
Hey Nick, thanks for a great talk so far. Great advice. I had a question specifically from your transition from doing your final project at Viking, into a professional Agile environment. Is there like one thing, some things that you could have done better as you were working on your final projects? Like, because I know like in a professional environment you have product managers that kind of, you have a general sense and direction of where you're going, but for the final project, I was wondering, what are steps that we can do to kind of, streamline that process?
Yeah, that's a great question. And not even so much streamline, but just to improve. So you really have to think about what your final project is. Your final project is the culmination of all this ton of work that you've put in over these past couple of months, and it's really going to be what you want to showcase when you're looking for work. And so you want to be able to speak to it from a pretty deep level. So, for example, with your project, you want to be able to say that you QA'd it. So, for example, when you step into a professional workflow, you're going to have QA. If you say that when you're talking about it, when you do your presentations, we did as much QA as we could. We tried it on different screen sizes. That's another thing that employers care about. That you really want to the awareness that things don't function the same in similar browsers, and sort of getting used to that now is really big. So if you can sort of incorporate all of the aspects of an Agile team into your process, that will really help. It's not easy. There's reasons why they're separate in real, real teams. But just making sure things work, and being able to explain this may not be a business venture, but you want to treat it as such. Being able to take almost a product standpoint from it and being able to explain why you did certain things. Being able to explain clearly your goals and what you're looking to do with it. I think is really important. As far as taking that, so I don't know if that answers your question, but I think the final project, it should be really exciting because it's a chance to sort of showcase all of that, and you can sort of take that Agile environment and use that to when you're describing your project to really beef up the what you have there. If you can say like, okay, we were looking at different. It works on different screen sizes. We tested it on different things. Being aware of that, we did this for these reasons. We decided to do this for these reasons. I think that's a pretty cool thing that you can do with a project that will really help, and it's really going to blow away people if you can do something like that and just be aware of what goes on in a professional workplace, because a big thing is going to be selling the fact that your experience, while not professional work experience, is very applicable. And so if you can show that you've been doing things as professionally as possible, I think that's really cool, and I think prospective employers are really going to get a kick out of that. If I didn't answer your question, let me know.
Oh no, that was great. Thank you so much.
Okay. So I have some questions on the right here. I don't know. Can you see those, Eric? Are those?
Yeah. So we have a prospective student. So I'll select that, and so now I'll just read that one off.
Sure.
I guess it was so, and then we have the continuation shortly thereafter. So.
Okay, I see that now.
Yeah. Let me. For some reason, my screen size is not. It's not. Thank you, Google, for not QAing the screen size of your Q&A app. Prospective student here. I'm curious about the prerequisites. I've been bouncing back and forth between Odin and the Viking prerequisites. Which subjects, languages, concepts did you find to be the most valuable while completing the actual Viking curriculum?
Okay. So valuable. Honestly, the biggest suggestion I can give you is to not overemphasize things like languages. So Viking did, and I assume still does, do Rails and JavaScript as far as languages and frameworks. So Ruby and JavaScript, and frameworks like Rails and Angular and a couple different ones in there. I was hired in a shop that uses C# and .NET and MVC and also JavaScript libraries and frameworks that I've never touched or heard of before, like React. So, I mean, the biggest thing I can really suggest is just know how to code. The language is almost irrelevant. When you look at code, you can generally tell, regardless of language, what's going on. Yeah, I mean that's really what it is. I mean, I think when
I don't know if it's me or did we lose Nick?
Yeah,
I think we did.
Oh. I think maybe he's just meditating and collecting his thoughts. Well, do any of you guys out there have thoughts and opinions about what was valuable for you going into the program, given that you're almost done with it?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Nick just said. The language, like learning specific syntax and memorizing it might be helpful, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is knowing how to program, pretty much.
Sorry, guys, I'm back. I don't know what happened. I don't know where I got cut off either, but really, yeah, the most important thing is just knowing how to program. I'm not sure where I left off or what I was cut out. I was kind of like going, and then all of a sudden, wait a second, I'm not online. But yeah, so it's just finding good, solid resources to learn. I can speak from experience that Viking is one of those resources. Like I said, there was Python, C#, a bunch of different languages that I really did not have solid experience or even a solid portfolio in, and they were willing to hire me. So it really is just all about the fundamentals and understanding what you're doing, without being worrying about the language. I think, like I said earlier, you want to be a programmer. You don't want to be a insert language of the month programmer.
Right. Fundies first. Other questions from anyone outside or in?
Hey Nick, I had a question. you talked about the importance of finding your role in the team. I was curious, is that something that you can work towards, or is it something that comes naturally?
That's a good question. You absolutely have to work towards it. Um, you're not going to be told that from day one, especially if because you're going to be jumping into a team that may have been together for weeks. It could have been together for months. It could have been together for years. So they're generally just going to expect you to sort of step in and know, but you're not going to. I know I was hesitant to, for example, pushing back was one of the most anxiety-filled things I've ever had to do, because I had someone in product who was directly speaking to like executives and getting this, I assumed, fed down from them to her, and I'm just being told what to do. And so learning that, I should be able to push back. I not should be able to. I'm supposed to push back if they're telling me to do things that I know are bad practice, or I know that you can't actually implement without some kind of cost, because there's a cost to everything that you do. Was a process. So it's very much a process. Don't worry about knowing all these things going in, and it's going to be different. I know our product manager, for example, she almost served as QA at her last job because it was a much smaller team. So what you're doing it's going to be pretty different. So just try to talk to people who have been there for a while, but just keep in mind that as a developer, you are not usually there just to write code. You're there to be the technical voice and the technical the implementer of the business decisions that are made, which is another big thing that I recommend, is knowing why you're doing things. Just as much as you should tell them, make sure everyone knows the cost of what you're doing. Make sure you know why. Make sure you understand why why this view should be served, or why they want to change different things in design, why they want to make this button bigger. Just try to be aware. That'll help you just in general in your career, because places want that. I can't emphasize how much they don't want people to just code things. They want people to really be involved with the company. But it's something that you learn. I'm still learning. I'm still really trying to get a grasp of like my role on the team and in the company. But yeah, so.
Thanks. That helps a lot.
Good question.
One more question for me, if I could.
Sure.
Because you had to jump onto a foreign language, foreign framework, everything foreign to you, I guess work-life balance for at least the first few months. How much did you find yourself doing outside of work, and just spending your free time studying? And did you ever get into a good balance from that?
So, the uShip is, it's a great place to work. They emphasize work-life balance pretty strongly. Generally, what a good place to work will do is they will give you small, maybe defects, maybe bugs, small things to work on. Because, like I said, they don't expect you to be immediately productive, but they'll give you ways to get your feet wet into the code. In that sense, C#, I was lucky enough where C# was pretty easy to pick up. And like I said, if you're a good programmer, unless you're doing something drastic, like if you're learning Ruby and JavaScript, and then all of a sudden you get a job coding in C++, that's gonna be a much bigger learning curve. But in general, the languages of the web are pretty similar. Knowing MVC frameworks are gonna help you out a lot. Just how things function, no matter what the actual language is. But I didn't have any problems with like a work-life balance. I had like a book that I read, I think, that I didn't even read it all, the entire thing through, just sort of like skimmed through. Whenever I had some downtime, I was just reading through code, and when I was solving these little bugs and defects that came my way, I was really trying to make sure that I understood what I was doing. And also knowing when to ask questions. They want you to sort of bang your head against the wall, I guess, in a sense, against the problem, but there's a point where you have to know whether or not you should ask for help. It's just making sure that everything that you do, you use as because like with me, they ramped up. So it was at first it was very, very simple tasks just to get me used to the workflow and the deployment process. and then it ramped up to, okay, well now you're on a team and now you're working on these tickets, and then okay, now you're doing pretty big pretty big work, part of a bigger project. So they should ramp you up. I wouldn't worry too much about that. But that being said, it's in your control. The more time you spend on it, the quicker you might pick it up. So I definitely suggest going out of your way and doing what you can to sort of get acclimated and to learn things as quick as possible. But don't expect them to expect you to be ready too soon. And don't expect. I don't think. Now I've heard horror stories the opposite, where companies give people a book and they're like, all right, all your free time you're reading this, and then come into work and everything. I don't think most places are like that. I know a couple of bootcamp graduates, one that I work with and a couple that I've become friendly with down here, and all of them have had similar experiences where they know that you'll pick it up. They're hiring you because they know you're competent. And so whatever you have to do that, they're not expecting you to just know things quickly, let alone not day one, but then within a week to know. Like I have a friend who builds APIs in Golang, and he would learn to JavaScript, I think, at his bootcamp. So I mean, and he didn't know, so he never touched Golang. I know what Golang is, but I couldn't tell you what it was if I looked at it right now. So he learned it over a couple of weeks. You'll be surprised. You'll be really surprised with how fast you can learn new languages. I think if you guys did some of the same exercises that we did, if not, I actually have a blog post on that too. But like you'll be surprised how quickly. Because like for example, JavaScript, I had never written in JavaScript before Viking. And I had written in Ruby, a little Python and everything, and then all of a sudden we had a weekend to sort of learn JavaScript, and I was terrified of it. And then come Monday, I was writing in JavaScript. So it's really not that. And if you did that, then you know how much work went into it. You probably weren't spending every waking moment doing JavaScript exercises. But even if you were 3 days of that, and you were pretty much ready to go. So yeah, I don't think you should. Don't worry about like stressing too much over. They'll give you resources, and you're at this point, if you graduated, you are intelligent enough to seek those resources out, and I'm sure to learn things at an appropriate pace.
Yeah, honestly, from my side, it's been weird, I guess, just because I feel like I'm not doing enough, just because we worked so hard in Viking, and now this seems easy. But
yeah, that's not gonna go away for a while. For a couple of reasons. One, because when you have a professional like Agile environment, you have things like QA, you have things like code review, and so it feels like Viking is just like 100 miles per hour constantly. Whereas there's a little bit of downtime where you're not just coding, you're not just solving problems. Sometimes it's meetings. I mean, I have so many meetings and they drive me insane, which I never expected as a developer. But it's it's going to be a while until you start being productive. And if you can Google it right now and you're going to see the same thing. You can Google like onboarding developers, where companies ask how long until their developers are supposed to be expected, until they're productive, and it's generally a while. Senior developers that I helped onboard, it was probably 2 sprints of work before they were actually doing stuff. And these were very, very senior level people who have worked at a couple of big places. And have a lot of experience, and they took a little bit of time. Our director of development is spending 6 months before he even starts doing director of development stuff, just programming and trying to learn what we're doing. So you're not alone. It's stressful. Me telling you you're not alone isn't going to make it any less stressful, but I promise you that you'll get there. You'll get to where you're actually helping and feeling productive. But it's normal. I felt useless my first couple of days. I sat in a dark room, and I was trying to figure out how to push code to get like a developer profile, which was just like my face and like a little bio about me onto like this page, and that's what I did for like 3 days, just learning, their code base and picking up C# and the deployment process. Because even the deployment process too, to deploy something in Viking, it's pretty easy if you use Heroku or whatever you end up using to get something from your computer to production. For professional environments, I know ours takes like up to 3 hours sometimes. You've got a bunch of tests, different Selenium tests, Arcturus tests. You've got tests against regression for SQL databases. You've got like all kinds of this entire process that takes forever, and you're just sitting there, all right, well, just waiting until it's done. So it's just different, but I don't stress about it.
Much appreciated.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we have time for one more here. And I see a question in the Q&A up, but I'm gonna punt that just because it's maybe not directly relevant to what we're talking about here. It's a little bit more focused on the Viking application process, and that's something I'd be happy to address maybe a little bit offline or via email or at an info session later this week. So specifically for Nick, are there questions about his journey? Especially given that you guys are currently in your final project planning phases. And actually, maybe I'll just ask that question myself, which is, Nick, we have a whole bunch of people who are, a whole bunch of students who are right now, they are at the beginning of their final projects. They have to come up with all the Agile stories. They have to, they have product owners, they have mock-ups, and then they have 2 weeks ahead that they're going to be putting together these two large group Agile sprints. So they're also going to be working in groups of 4 and 5 people. So from your perspective, knowing that they are currently in the planning process of that, what advice do you have to be successful in the planning process to save pain and suffering during the development process?
Okay. So planning, just make sure your tickets are as granular as possible. I know planning. I remember doing my final project, and just like at that point, an epic could have been the same as a story for me. I mean, just do this, and then I wanted to just code and get into it. But the more granular that you have everything planned, broken down, the more smooth it goes. If you just focus on, adding this feature and that, you're just doing things and tackling it in as small pieces as possible, really let the whole process go a lot smoother. And also plan, give yourself some time. Don't just assume that you're going to be coding perfectly the entire time. Get planned for QA, self QA. Plan to be able to test things. Plan for code review. Because if you don't plan for those things are going to happen anyway, or things are going to break, and it's going to make things take longer anyway. So if you plan for it now, I mean, it can really improve your efficiency. Plus, just knowing about that, like I said, just knowing that kind of stuff goes into planning is good when you're presenting these projects. Being able to speak to it and say, in planning we set aside time for code review and QA. We made sure that things were working on different browsers and things like that.
Nice. All right. Well, I think that's all we have time for tonight. So Nick, thank you very much. Nick again is a developer at uShip in Austin, former Viking student, providing some wisdom on what that transition is like, going from student to developer. And so thanks a lot, Nick, for joining us. Thanks a lot, everyone, all our fabulous students who are here with us, and everyone who's out there watching. We'll be back next week with another conversation with a developer, and happy to answer questions in the meantime. So thanks a lot, everyone, and have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Take care. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank you so much.